The night was thick, unnervingly still, as if the very air held its breath. On the sprawling Whitmore Plantation in Georgia, 1847. No wind stirred the magnolia trees. No crickets sang, only the faint creak of the mansion's wooden floors under unseen feet. A scream had been reported, but by morning, no one could say whose it was, or even if it had truly occurred. Locals whispered of Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore, a woman whose elegance and grace hid a darker obsession. She is the perfect lady, they would say, but children were missing, and no explanation sufficed. Not in the ledgers of the overseers, not in the notes of the plantation doctor. Singular disappearances were recorded with chilling regularity, each entry bearing the same cryptic phrase, fate unknown. The first disappearance had been that of young Eliza May, a small bright-eyed girl of 7, last seen playing near the edge of the slave quarters, an area supposedly watched over by trusted staff, yet she vanished, leaving only her favorite doll left neatly on the doorstep. Her mother's frantic pleas went unheard. The overseer's log dryly noted child absent, because unverified, mysterious occurrence. Months later, another child, Samuel Whitmore, born of the plantation's main house, also disappeared. Witnesses claimed to have seen him enter a hall lined with portraits of the Whitmore ancestors, and never leave. The sound of his laughter, once echoing down the corridors, was replaced by a hollow silence. Diaries discovered decades later spoke of nightly rituals, of keys hidden in the library, of footsteps that could not be explained. The plantation itself seemed alive, its corridors stretching like a labyrinth, shadows clinging to corners thick and malevolent. Servants spoke of whispers in the nursery, of toys moving on their own, of eyes watching from darkened portraits. Some claimed that on moonless nights the children's laughter could be heard, but it sounded distorted, unnatural, as if coming from beneath the earth itself. A strange motif emerges in the whispers of the nearby towns. They spoke of the Oak Hollow Curse, a local superstition warning that some women obsessed with lineage and legacy would hide their offspring, or worse, trade them for secrets and power. It was said that the plantation mistress, Mrs. Whitmore, had learned of ancient rituals from a traveling fortune-teller, a woman whose caravan had visited the South only once, yet whose shadow seemed to linger in the Whitmore house. By spring of 1847, the plantation was tense, the air thick with unease. Even the neighboring landowners felt it, a subtle dread that crept along fences and hedges. Letters between plantation managers mentioned the unsettling feeling of being observed at all hours, and not by the living. Reports filed with the local magistrate hint at unusual activity, doors locking by themselves, the faint scent of something sweet, like baby powder, mixed with decay, a lingering, inexplicable smell in the halls. Folk stories began to intertwine with fact. Some claimed that Mrs. Whitmore had kept a secret nursery, hidden behind a false wall, where children were said to vanish into darkness. A handcrafted cradle carved with strange symbols was reportedly found years later, yet any official record of it had vanished entirely. An account from 1847, published in a small local gazette, tells of a stranger arriving at the Whitmore estate, claiming to have been guided by spirits, seeking the lost children. The visitor wrote, "I sensed their presence, but the house itself seemed to swallow them, a labyrinth of corridors and hidden chambers, a mistress whose gaze could pierce the veil between worlds." Even the plantation ledger hints at the impossible. Entries marked, "Child attended to yet not seen," a language cold clinical, yet impossibly haunting. A report mentions a servant's confession, "I saw little Samuel. He spoke, but his lips did not move. The eyes, they were not his." The handwriting ends abruptly, the page stained, the record destroyed soon after. And then, the folklore took hold. Children who disappeared on plantations were said to roam the grounds as shadows, silent observers of the living. Their laughter, occasionally heard, was a warning, a reminder of the dark obsession of those who sought to control life itself. The plantation mistress became a figure of dread, a ghostly presence in the minds of all who dared to visit. This is the story of secrets buried beneath the grandeur of wealth, of whispers that became screams, of a lady whose obsession with lineage and hidden horrors would echo through generations. The air of Whitmore Plantation in 1847 was not merely oppressive. It was alive, sentient, watching, waiting, as though the walls themselves remembered every lost child, every unanswered question, every shadow that dared to move. Georgia, 1847. A land of sprawling plantations, rolling fields of cotton and oppressive summer heat that hung over the valleys like a heavy shroud. The Whitmore estate rose above the lowlands, its white columns gleaming in the sunlight, yet its shadow stretched far longer than the physical structure itself. Beyond the neatly trimmed hedges and orchards, an undercurrent of unease lingered, a sense that beneath the prosperity and refinement, something unspeakable festered. Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore, elegant, commanding, and immaculately dressed, was regarded by society as the epitome of Southern gentility. Visitors admired her poise, her knowledge of the arts and letters, and the meticulous order of her home. Yet behind her refined smile, whispers followed her every step. Whispers of strange obsessions and secretive behavior. Servants spoke in hushed tones. Neighbors avoided her eyes, for fear of discovering what she might conceal. The plantation itself was a microcosm of hierarchy and terror. Slaves worked from dawn until dusk tending the cotton fields, the livestock, and the enormous gardens. Yet reports from the overseers reveal more than just labor disputes or crop yields. They describe an odd rhythm to life within the plantation, as if the household operated on a timetable dictated by something beyond natural law. Lights in the manor flickered without cause. Doors opened or slammed shut without wind. A low hum barely perceptible seemed to follow certain corridors. Local newspapers from 1847, sparse and cautious, mentioned the Whitmore estate in passing. A notable household, well-maintained, yet singular occurrences were reported. One article tucked into the back pages of the Georgia Gazette noted, servants claimed to hear the pitter-patter of small feet in empty halls. No child was present, fate unknown. A simple clinical observation, yet chilling to those who understood the implications. The geography of the estate itself contributed to its mystery. Dense woods bordered the main house. Tangled undergrowth and moss-laden oaks created natural barriers hiding paths and small clearings. In the shadow of these woods, villagers claimed to see flickers of movement, small figures darting between trees, voices carried on the wind melodic yet unnatural. At night the fog would settle like a shroud over the fields, softening shapes, making the familiar unfamiliar, and amplifying every imagined sound into a portent of dread. Accounts from former slaves recorded decades later in oral histories hint at the oppressive psychological atmosphere. They spoke of an invisible presence watching from the library, of children taken under the guise of lessons, of lullabies echoing in empty rooms, and of a mistress whose gaze could instill fear with a mere glance. These testimonies, while fragmented, coalesce into a portrait of control and obsession, of a household where the boundaries between life and death, presence and absence, were fluid, manipulated by unseen hands. Even the architecture seemed complicit, secret staircases, hidden panels, and locked doors whose keys were never accounted for. A servant's diary mentions a wall behind the main parlor covered in tapestries that could be moved, revealing a hidden chamber, a place for the children the diary cryptically notes, yet no further details survive. All pages after this entry were reportedly destroyed, burnt in a discreet fire, leaving only fragments and speculation. Outside the immediate walls of the plantation, the town of Whitmore Hollow had its own legends. Locals spoke of the lady of the manor who communed with spirits, of strange lights in the windows at midnight, of the sound of tiny footsteps that would vanish when approached. In particular, the annual cotton harvest brought anxiety. Children who ventured too close to the manor's inner grounds often returned pale, wide-eyed, or did not return at all. These events were whispered, never openly discussed, and certainly never documented in official records. Even letters between landowners show unease. One such correspondence reads, "There is a darkness about Whitmore, a heaviness that does not lift. The children vanish." Or so it is told. One does not speak of it. The language is cautious, polite, yet the subtext is clear: fear, suspicion, and the unspoken understanding that some secrets are best left uninvestigated. Folklore intertwined with fact in ways that made the boundaries indistinguishable. Stories of a hidden nursery of shadows moving independently of their occupants, of the mistress herself performing enigmatic rituals, were common in whispered conversation. In particular, the superstition of the shadowed cradle persisted, a tale that a child hidden within the walls could exist in both life and death simultaneously, that those who sought lineage above compassion could bend the natural order, and that the echoes of such actions lingered haunting every hall, every corner, every candlelit room. By the late spring of 1847, the plantation was a place of palpable tension, the air heavy with the scent of magnolia and cotton, yet tainted with something more, an indefinable essence, akin to fear, sorrow, and secrecy. The Whitmore estate was not merely a home. It was a stage, a carefully orchestrated theater of control and mystery, where every servant, every visitor, every whisper of wind contributed to a narrative that no outsider fully understood. As the summer approached, reports of missing children continued. Logs marked last seen in nursery, absent at dawn, fate unknown. Letters sent to distant relatives hint at unease, but never reveal the truth. And so the context is established. A world of wealth and refinement, yet shadowed by disappearance, fear, and a hidden obsession. A world where fact and folklore merge, where every corner of the Whitmore plantation hides both story and secret. The records are sparse, yet undeniable, buried in ledgers, diaries, and the fragile pages of 1847 newspapers. An overseer's account written in painstaking script describes a day when young Abigail Whitmore was sent to collect water from the well. She never returned. The overseer noted child vanished as if swallowed by the earth. Search yielded naught. Fate unknown. The words are clinical, detached, yet their implications chill the spine. Official letters from the county magistrate acknowledge the disappearances, yet no investigation is recorded. One document reads, "Several children missing from Whitmore Plantation. Witnesses inconsistent, circumstances suspicious yet unprovable. Further inquiry deemed unnecessary by the court. The language is deliberate, bureaucratic, almost protective of the truth, shielding Mrs. Whitmore's reputation." Diaries discovered decades later tell more. A servant, Mary Elkins, wrote, "I saw the mistress enter the west wing with the children. They followed willingly, or perhaps compelled. I dared not ask. The keys to the hidden chamber were never left unattended." Mary's handwriting trembles across the page, ink blotting in a way that suggests fear, or perhaps tears. No other entries clarify the children's fate. Only fragmented sentences, ominous pauses, the feeling of unsaid horrors lingering in the margins. One of the few contemporary newspaper reports from the Georgia Sentinel references a mysterious occurrence at the Whitmore estate. It states, "Voices of children heard where none should be. Small footprints appear and vanish. Local superstitions abound. Cause indeterminable." Though brief, the account confirms what the townspeople whispered. Fact and folklore already intertwined. The plantation was a site of singular disappearances, yet officially, nothing concrete existed. Even the estate's medical records contain peculiarities. Dr. Elias Harrow, who served the Whitmore household, noted repeated observations of children exhibiting unusual behaviors, or absences that could not be explained. In one entry, he writes, "Samuel Whitmore seen at dawn in nursery, yet not observed in morning muster. Eyes unblinking, lips still, perhaps sleepwalking, perhaps something else. The ellipsis, deliberate or subconscious, leaves room for interpretation, something else indeed." Letters between Mrs. Whitmore and distant family members provide glimpses into her psyche. Phrases such as, "They must be preserved," "for the legacy," "for the bloodline," recur, a fixation on lineage, heritage, and control. Yet she speaks of no methods, only hints, only cryptic reassurances. The subtext is clear to the careful reader. Something is hidden, something unnatural, beneath the polite veneer of plantation life. Hushed oral testimonies collected decades later suggest the presence of secret spaces, hidden doors, false panels, rooms within rooms. One former servant recalls, "The mistress showed me a key, not for the nursery, something behind the library. I never returned there. The air was cold, smelled of wax and something iron." The testimony is fragmented. the details blurred, yet unmistakable. A concealed chamber, a place where children entered and disappeared. The Plantation ledger corroborates these accounts. Entries list children present on certain days, and absent the next, nothing noted, no explanations given. The repeated phrase, child attended to, not seen thereafter, appears in different handwriting. Some entries show corrections, as if someone attempted to cover the truth or erase evidence. Reports also describe mysterious nocturnal activity, lights flickering behind the curtains, shadows that moved independently of candlelight, servants hearing footsteps echoing in empty halls, whispers carried through ventilation shafts, and doors opening without wind. The overseer's notes mention that multiple staff members attested to these phenomena, yet when questioned publicly, they recanted, claiming fatigue or imagination. Fear silenced them, fear of the mistress, fear of the unknown. A single surviving ledger entry heavily smudged hints at ritual. Objects placed, children obedient, protection granted by bloodline, must not be disturbed. The meaning is obscure, the handwriting loops tightly, almost frantic. Some scholars speculate these may have been protective charms. Others suggest something far darker. Even census records offer unsettling hints. Gaps where children should be accounted for, inconsistent ages, missing names. The pattern is subtle but unmistakable, and it repeats across neighboring plantations with similar occurrences. The motif emerges. Children vanish quietly. Households remain outwardly serene. Documents maintain polite ambiguity, yet folklore amplifies the terror. Folklore in surrounding counties describes the Lady of the Oak Hollow, a figure both admired and feared, rumored to maintain control over children bending rules of life and death. Ghost stories recount sightings of small figures at dusk, shadows that seem to move with intention, the echo of children's laughter that never belonged to any known child. This legend intertwines with fact, lending credence to the whispered fears of the Whitmore plantation. Letters from visitors to the plantation hint at strange observations. A governess reports seeing children appear and vanish in certain rooms. A traveling merchant noted odd sounds at night, the mistress present observing silently. Some reports include sketches, crude outlines of hidden doors, shadows in corridors, but none survive fully, most lost to fire or deliberate destruction. Even in official correspondence, vague references to unaccounted children or peculiar occurrences persist. The language is cautious, perhaps willfully blind, leaving modern investigators with fragments, pieces of a puzzle that defy resolution. The combination of bureaucratic record diary and folk memory paints a chilling picture, a household both ordinary and monstrous. By the end of P3, the pattern is clear. Multiple sources, multiple accounts, corroborate that children disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The mistress's role remains ambiguous. Records suggest obsession, secrecy, and perhaps ritual. Folklore fills the gaps, lending terror to the unknown. And the plantation, outwardly elegant, conceals a darkness that no ledger can fully capture. The air in Whitmore Hollow carried stories, not just of missing children, but of those who lived in the shadow of fear. Servants, neighbors, visitors, all touched by the mystery in ways they scarcely understood. Some claimed they felt the house breathe, an almost sentient presence, shifting with each footstep, watching with unseen eyes. Mary Elkins, the former servant whose diary fragments survived, recounted nights she spent alone in the nursery. I would hear them, the children, calling softly, giggling. Yet when I turned, nothing was there, just shadows, and the mistress watching from the doorway. Her eyes, unyielding, knowing, yet empty of warmth. The passage trails off, ink smeared as if by trembling hands, leaving the horror to imagination. Another witness, Thomas Bell, a field hand, remembered an evening when the fog rolled in thick from the river. I saw small figures in the tree line. They ran, but the ground made no prints. When I called, they vanished. The air turned cold like winter in July, I swear. I heard laughter faint, and then nothing. Not even wind. Just silence that screamed. His words, recorded decades later, blend fear with the rhythm of oral tradition, a living folklore, shaping how the community remembered and feared. Even the children of neighboring plantations whispered of the Whitmore estate, tales of a lady who took them away for reasons no one could understand, stories of lights in upper windows at midnight, of dolls appearing in rooms where no child slept, of lullabies sung softly, but with words twisted and unfamiliar. These stories circulated quietly, carried by the wind, passed down like a warning. Local folklore tells of a ritual known as the Watching of the Oak Hollow, supposedly performed by the mistress herself. Legend says the ritual bound children to the house, to her will, to the bloodline. In the evenings the house would glow faintly, candles flickering in patterns too precise for chance. Villagers claimed that small footprints appeared on the lawn, vanishing without trace. Even the family dog would not enter the east wing, shivering, whining, retreating. A visitor, a traveling minister from Savannah, recorded his experience. The house exudes a presence, unnatural. I felt eyes upon me, and yet none were there. I heard voices faint, as if children spoke in tongues lost to this world. The mistress observed silently, her composure unbroken, but I sensed her knowledge of things better left unsaid. His letter survived in the archives hidden among correspondence of other plantation owners, the language cautious, yet laced with dread. Even within the household, relationships bore the imprint of fear. Slaves recounted that no child dared approach the library when the mistress was present, that meals were eaten in silence, that laughter was stifled. Even servants who had grown up on the estate felt a palpable tension, the sense of being observed, the sense that one misstep could awaken the wrath of the unseen or expose knowledge they were never meant to witness. The folklore extended beyond the estate itself. Townspeople whispered of shadows at the edges of the cotton fields, of small pale faces peering from the windows, vanishing when approached. Mothers warned their children never to stray near the Whitmore lands. She takes them, they would whisper. She keeps them in the walls. She keeps them from the living. The repetition of such warnings cemented a pattern. Fear entwined with legend, and legend entwined with fact. Several diaries discovered decades later hint at the human toll. An assistant governess writes, "The children speak at night, but their voices are hollow, repeating words I do not understand. I cannot sleep. I hear them in the walls. I dare not mention it." The entry is cut short, ink bleeding through pages, as though the hand that wrote it wished to erase the memory, or the memory itself resisted the world of the living. Visitors to the estate left with impressions that would never fade. The smell of wax and faint decay in the hallways, the soft, irregular creak of floorboards where no one walked, whispers that seemed to respond to questions unasked. A traveling merchant wrote, "I dared not spend the night, for the house is alive. Its walls pulse, its doors breathe, and the mistress, she is aware of all." His words, though cautious, convey a terror that resonates through the folklore. Even the neighbors' children contributed to the stories. Some claimed that if you passed the estate at twilight, you could hear the faintest sounds of a lullaby, sung slowly, sweetly, and yet twisted. Words that seemed familiar, yet wrong. The melody carried on the wind, weaving between trees, past fences, into the fields, leaving chills in the marrow of anyone who heard it. By the late summer of 1847, the human narrative and folklore became inseparable. Reports of strange occurrences were documented. Letters, diaries, oral histories, all tell of a household under an oppressive and supernatural veil. Children disappear, shadows linger, laughter distorts, doors close themselves, and the mistress watches silently, a figure simultaneously human and beyond human. The combination of human witness, recorded observation, and folklore paints a chilling tableau. The Whitmore Plantation is more than a house. It is a nexus of fear, of secrecy, of obsession. A place where fact and myth collide, where the walls seem to remember, where the air carries whispers of the unseen, where human experience becomes legend, and legend in turn becomes truth. And as twilight deepened, the stories converge. Children's voices vanished into corridors, servants trembling, visitors fleeing, the landscape itself seeming to conspire with the mistress. The estate becomes a stage for the interplay of fear, memory, and myth, setting the scene for the mysteries that will unfold, the singular disappearances, the hidden chambers, the obsessions that consume, a tableau that will not easily release its secrets. By the autumn of 1847, the atmosphere surrounding the Whitmore plantation thickened, not with fog, but with apprehension, a tension that seemed to seep from the very walls, lingering in the corridors, and infiltrating the minds of all who dared enter. Records from the overseer describe an incident that would later be referred to as the vanishing of October 9th. On that day, two children twins named Clara and Jonathan Whitmore were last seen playing near the West Wing. A servant, Eleanor James, reported seeing them follow Mrs. Whitmore into the library. They entered willingly, she wrote, and then they were gone. The mistress remained calm, as if nothing had happened. The entry is stark, unnervingly precise, yet hints at something unspeakable. Attempts to locate the children proved futile. Search parties combed the estate, neighbors assisted, yet no trace was ever found. The official ledger simply recorded, children not accounted for, fate unknown. Investigation inconclusive. A footnote later scratched out reads, the mistress observed, no signs of distress, behavior peculiar. That footnote, small as it was, would later fuel decades of speculation and fear. Meanwhile, letters between Mrs. Whitmore and her distant relatives became more cryptic. Phrases like, they are safe, under my watchful eye repeated. But subsequent sentences were torn inked over or left incomplete. The subtleties of phrasing suggested secrecy, something deliberately hidden, a truth neither documented nor spoken. Witness testimonies began to contradict each other. Some servants insisted the children had vanished into hidden chambers. Others claimed to see small shadows flitting across the halls. Some even spoke of spectral forms. Children's laughter carried on the wind, but empty of life. Each account clashed with the other, creating a labyrinth of ambiguity and suspicion. In one chilling diary entry, Mary Elkins described an object discovered in the hidden chamber. A small chest, bound in iron, its contents removed. Only a note remained. Forever mine. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, but the tone sent shivers through those who read it. Who had written it? Why was it left behind? What became of the contents? And the children? The folklore surrounding the estate intensified. Tales of the Oak Hollow ritual persisted, whispered to outsiders as a superstition, yet recounted by those who served the house as reality. That a mistress could manipulate fate itself, bind souls to the land, and control children's lives beyond comprehension. The stories blurred lines between fact and legend, yet enough corroboration existed to unsettle the mind. A traveling merchant wrote of visiting the estate during harvest. I heard the children singing in the east wing, the tune familiar, yet warped. I approached and saw nothing, only shadows, and the mistress observing, her eyes unyielding, seeing beyond sight. His account, while anecdotal, complements official reports, suggesting something unnatural, something deliberate, hidden in plain sight. Even the magistrate's correspondence hints at unease. The plantation maintains order, but reports of missing children continue. Witnesses inconsistent, the household cooperative, yet silence prevails. Singular occurrences remain unresolved. The phrasing is deliberate, bureaucratic, concealing fear, and perhaps complicity. By winter, rumors had spread beyond the county. Neighboring plantations whispered of similarities, singular disappearances, children vanishing under circumstances that defied explanation. Some claimed the Whitmore estate was a nexus, a place where human law and divine or supernatural order collided, and where the mistress exercised dominion over both. Then came the testimony of a former governess decades later. She claimed to have witnessed a hidden ritual. The children were placed upon a dais, symbols drawn upon the floor. The mistress chanted softly, objects laid around them, and then they vanished. I swear, I saw them, yet they were nowhere. I fled, never to return. Her account, both vivid and fragmentary, bridges fact and folklore, a haunting tableau that chills the imagination. Physical evidence was scarce, yet anomalies persisted. Diaries partially destroyed, letters altered, Ledgers scratched, a chest emptied, footprints appearing and disappearing, shadows cast by candlelight behaving unnaturally. The sum of these occurrences creates a tableau of terror, a crescendo building toward understanding, or as close to understanding as anyone might dare. The climax reaches when multiple sources converge: the overseer's log, the governess's diary, the merchant's letters, local folklore. All point to the same terrifying possibility: children had been removed, intentionally, by a mistress whose obsession with control, bloodline, and secrecy knew no bounds. A presence both human and beyond human, controlling life and absence, bending reality in ways the outside world could barely comprehend. It is in these converging narratives, the contradiction of testimonies, the disappearance of physical evidence, the whispered tales of rituals in shadowed corridors, that the horror of the Whitmore plantation fully manifests. The mistress's secret remains unconfirmed, but the pattern is unmistakable: her obsession, her dominion, her silence, all amplifying the dread, leaving modern readers and listeners to wonder: what is fact and what is legend? Or has legend become fact? The estate itself seems almost alive, breathing in the tension, pulsing with memory. Every hallway, every chamber, every hidden door a repository of secrets. The missing children, the cryptic notes, the destroyed diaries, all coalesce into a singular narrative of obsession, control, and horror. Winter settled over the Whitmore plantation like a shroud. The fields muted the trees, skeletal, and the mansion, looming, silent, yet somehow alive. Its walls seemed to hold a memory of everything that had passed within, every cry, every laugh, every secret. It was in this silence that investigators long after 1847 would uncover the remnants of a horror carefully hidden. Diaries discovered in a trunk under the servants' quarters were partially charred, pages missing. But enough remained to hint at the unthinkable. Mrs. Whitmore meticulously recorded each child's arrival, their habits, their fears. Yet the final entries spoke only in coded language. The vessel is full, the watchers satisfied. Nothing may escape. The meaning is obscure, terrifying, deliberate. Physical artifacts were equally mysterious. A small iron-bound chest was found beneath a floorboard, emptied save for a folded note: "Forever mine. Beyond life. Beyond death." Investigators noted scorch marks around the edges, suggesting it had been ritually cleansed, or perhaps a warning left behind. Footprints near the chest suggested small children, yet no children were ever present. The very floorboards seemed to resist explanation. Warped, scorched, untouched. A riddle that refused solution. Witness testimonies conflicted. Servants who had fled the estate recalled hearing the children's voices echoing through walls. Yet visitors claimed the halls were empty. The mistress herself was seen walking silently through corridors, eyes unblinking, observing, yet offering no explanation. One report states, "She moves like one, both of this world," and another, "Her presence commands silence, fear, and obedience." The folklore only intensified the dread. Tales of shadowed corridors where children disappeared, of lullabies sung in languages no one recognized, of faint laughter echoing through the fog. One neighbor swore that on certain nights tiny shadows would slip from the east wing and vanish into the woods. That Mrs. Whitmore herself could appear in two places at once, walking and observing simultaneously. The legends blurred the line between human cruelty and supernatural horror. The local magistrate's records added another layer of unease. Investigation hampered by conflicting testimonies, witnesses reluctant, evidence removed or destroyed, occurrences singular and inexplicable. The language is sterile, careful, yet the implication is clear. Someone or something was manipulating events beyond comprehension. Even letters from relatives hint at coercion. All is well. The children are safe, under vigilant care. Disturbances are illusions, but the torn and smudged pages reveal more. Corrections, overwrites, ink blots, a desperation to conceal, perhaps even guilt or fear. The most chilling account comes from Mary Elkins, whose diary survived the fire. She describes witnessing a ritual, small children placed within a circle of symbols, candles flickering, the mistress chanting softly, the children's laughter distorted, and then nothing. Mary writes, "I turned away. When I looked again, they were gone. Not outside, not within, nowhere. Only silence, and the mistress's gaze upon me." Artifacts discovered decades later hint at a pattern. The plantation logs show repeated absences. Ledgers note children attended, not seen thereafter. Letters smudged, pages torn, the smallest clues pointing to an obsession with control, secrecy, and perhaps life beyond the natural order. The evidence is fragmentary, yet hauntingly consistent. Even the landscape seemed complicit. The oak trees surrounding the estate twisted unnaturally, roots forming shapes resembling small hands, paths worn into strange geometries, the fog rolling in patterns that seemed purposeful. Some visitors claimed that shadows moved independent of light sources, the very air carrying a sense of watchfulness, as if the plantation itself were alive and aware. The convergence of human record and legend creates a terrifying tableau. Diaries, letters, ledgers, oral testimonies, folklore, all pointing to the same terrifying possibility. Children were removed, intentionally, deliberately, their fate hidden. The mistress's obsession with lineage secrecy and dominion over life and absence reaching beyond comprehension. One final detail seals the horror. A single charred fragment of a diary contains a sentence incomplete. "The watchers approve. The children belong, and I shall." The final word obliterated, leaving nothing but ambiguity and dread. No one knows what she intended, or what truly became of the children. By the end of this narrative, the Whitmore Plantation emerges as more than a household. It is a nexus of terror, a labyrinth of secrecy and obsession, a place where human cruelty, bureaucracy, and folklore intertwine, where walls remember, floors whisper, shadows mock, and life itself bends under the will of a mistress whose secrets refuse to remain buried. It is here at the intersection of documented fact and whispered legend that the audience confronts the full weight of horror, the unknown fate of children, the unseen rituals, the obliterated records, and the lingering sense that the Whitmore Plantation is not merely haunted by ghosts, but by the memory of acts too horrifying to name, too complex to explain, and yet impossible to forget. The years passed, decades, centuries, yet the Whitmore Plantation remains, standing, silent, imposing, its grandeur intact, but its secrets undisturbed. Locals still speak of lights flickering behind shuttered windows, of laughter that does not belong to any living child, of shadows slipping along the halls, silent observers of a past never fully revealed. Historians have pieced together fragments of diaries, letters, ledgers, and oral testimonies. Each fragment offers a glimpse, but never the full picture. What became of Clara, Jonathan, Samuel, and the others? Were they hidden, removed, or claimed by forces beyond understanding? The archives provide no answers, only fragments, holes in the record, empty spaces where truth should reside. Some claim the plantation itself is alive, that the walls remember the footsteps of the vanished, that the floors whisper of deeds too dark to record. Others insist it is simply a story, folklore amplified over generations. Yet when one walks the corridors, feels the chill of unseen eyes, hears the soft echoes of children, it becomes impossible to separate fact from legend, reality from shadow. Visitors in recent years speak of the oppressive atmosphere, an almost palpable sense of being observed, of histories pressing against the present. Some swear they see fleeting figures in the upper windows, tiny shapes disappearing before the eye can focus. Others report cold spots, sudden chills, and the unshakable sensation that they are not alone. The Whitmore estate, in all its elegance, remains a monument to obsession, secrecy, and perhaps madness. Its story resonates beyond the records, beyond newspapers and letters. It is a cautionary tale of the extremes of control, of human desire to manipulate life, of what is left behind when children vanish without explanation. And yet, the mystery persists. The house holds its secrets. The children's fates remain unknown. Every shadow, every echo, every flicker of light seems to ask the same question. What truly happened within those walls? Who can claim to understand the mind of Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore, or the forces she may have invoked, knowingly or unknowingly? As you reflect on this tale, consider the quiet power of history, how facts can intertwine with folklore, how absence can speak louder than presence, and how one person's obsession can leave an imprint across generations. In the case of the Whitmore plantation, the questions remain unanswered, unrelenting, and chilling. What would you have done if you had walked those halls, if you had seen the children, or felt the presence of the mistress? Watching silently, waiting, assessing. Would you have fled or stayed? Trying to unravel the truth. Perhaps some questions are meant to linger, to haunt, to remind us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. You have just glimpsed at another shadow in the corridors of history, a singular disappearance, a secret carefully preserved, and a story that refuses to leave the mind quietly. The Whitmore children, lost, the mistress, inscrutable, the estate, eternal. If you wish to explore more of these forgotten and haunting chapters, more singular disappearances, more hidden histories, subscribe and walk with us through the shadows of the past. You may never see the world quite the same again.